I think it's interesting. I'm going to let Molly get that figured out. just as a let me know when to rock. Hello and welcome to the 2023 Kentucky Derby Final Answer Show, Kentucky Oaks 2, brought to you by Tailor-Made Partnerships and Medallion Racing, as well as In the Money Media. I am Peter Thomas Fornatel. I am not your host. I'm going to be on the panel tonight, but I will throw it over to our more than capable host. We imported her all the way from England. She is my colleague at Sky Sports Racing over there. She is Vanessa Ryle. Vanessa, take it away.
Thanks, Peter. I feel bad that this is like the most American racing weekend of the whole year. And so what better person to pull in than an incredibly British girl? It just doesn't really make that much sense. But the reason that it's going to work is because I have fresh eyes, guys. Fresh eyes on this form. I'm coming in here with a very fresh look for you all, and it gives me a bit of clarity of thought. That's the way I like to play it anyway. Before we kick off, lads, how excited are we? Let's start with you, JK. Oaks and Derby weekends, because I've kept calling it Derby so far. So we're actually going to have a swear box, everyone. Every time I say Derby, we're going to put £10 in the swear box, and then at the end of the night...
We don't have any pounds.
Yeah, no.
God damn it, it's a bad start, everyone. $10 in the swear box, and at the end of the night, however much is in there, we'll punt it on the Derby. There we go. JK, let's start with you. How excited are you for the weekend ahead?
I'm always excited. I mean, these 2 days of racing, outside of the Breeders' Cup, it's hard to beat this. I mean, obviously Belmont Day is good, Travers Day is good, but man, it's such an exciting moment leading into Friday for the Oaks, just because there's no we'll get them next year when it comes to the Oaks, and it's also with the Derby. And the other great part about the Derby is, if you're new to this game or if you're established in this game, people who are in your lives start bugging you very much in these next couple of days. So it makes you feel like, you're kind of cool for a couple of days. And so it's a lot of fun. I look forward to it every year.
That's like the Grand National. At home for me, that's what happens around the Grand National and Aintree weekend. All the people who have no interest in horse racing get in contact, want to be my best friend and want to tip for the Grand National. I always point in the direction of a loser, just to make a point. Peter Fornatali, how hyped are you for the weekend?
It's the best. We get to be mainstream for a few days, and that is so special. I mean, I see it in our numbers. The Breeders' Cup is amazing. We do great, but it's an order of magnitude more when it comes to the Kentucky Derby, how much people are interested in this. And this year in particular, we have 2 days of star-studded racing and some opportunities to make money. I'm out of my skin right now.
And Philip, final word to you on the hype, because to have the horses that you've got running over this weekend, I mean, that just must, well, I can already tell, it adds a whole nother layer for you on the excitement stage.
Yeah, I think at this point it's like the stress part's a little bit over. I've got everybody's tickets. We got everybody taken care of. So now it's really just enjoying it. And I told my wife on Friday, I said, you're just going to have to pinch me, as we get ready to go into hopefully all medallion pick 3 there at the end of the card. But it's just, it's just, I grew up as a kid, and this is something I can only have dreamed about being a part of. So it's unbelievable.
Love it. The hype is real. Let's kick off and find everyone some winners, because that's what you're all here for. Friday, all about the fillies, and we're going to start with race 8, everyone. We're going to do the few races in the lead up to the Oaks, and then give the Oaks our main sort of attention and focus. But start on race 8, because here we get to see Caravel in the Unbridled Sydney Stakes. It's over the 5.5 furlongs, and Caravel, of course, the surprise winner of the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, sadly beating the Euros in the process, which is a bit of a disappointment for me. She's had one gritty run since, one win since. I mean, this is surely hers for the taking, JK.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Caravel, and you know what? Actually, to be funny, you might see her again. I would think possibly if she.
Let's go.
Yeah, I would think Brad Cox. I can't wait to see him in tails and a hat. I mean, I've been a huge fan of this horse for a long time. I joked today with Nick Luck that I don't think there's another human being who's singled this horse more than I have. I loved her races for her previous connection.
Not in the Breeders' Cup, to be clear.
Oh, no, I didn't say it was there. I didn't bet her. I actually didn't even bet her there, which is even more annoying. She's just, look, I looked through this race thinking, how can I get creative? And it's just, to me, it's not possible. I think she's a cinch drawn, especially drawn where she's drawn. I think she's comfortable out there. She can see everything to her inside. Look at her races where she draws towards the outside. She's really hard to beat. I'm going to be ice cold in here, and if you're playing along with us, understand that we will be ice cold to Caravel to get started on the late pick 5 on Oaks Day.
Okay. What about you, Peter?
I get it. I understand Jonathan's enthusiasm, and on paper, completely warranted, and I love her as well, and I've been a big fan for a long time since the Liz Merriman days. I've always loved Caravel. I guess the question you're supposed to ask is, why is she running in this race on the Friday against her own sex instead of running for 200,000 more on the Saturday against horses she just beat? And JK might have hit upon the answer, which is there are some other goals in mind, specifically a certain race meeting of some import in the Berkshires in England in the middle of June, and it just makes me wonder if that's all it is, then I'm fine going forward with the great confidence that Jonathan has. It does. I think you're supposed to at least wonder a little bit about this easier spot as opposed to the harder spot. Does that say she's maybe short of fitness? For me, I'm going to have a lot of Caravel. I will have a couple of backups. I thought that Base Storm, the one runner, was maybe an interesting alternative, turning back, who should be well suited by this test. And I felt like number 8, Ouvre, you could make excuses for the last and could improve second time off the layoff. Caravel's supposed to win, but I'll have a little bit of 1 and 8 as well.
Yeah, I thought Ouvre, you're looking for her to bounce back the last day, but she has a few excuses. Philip, if this is a stepping stone for Caravel, as people seem to think it might be, to Royal Ascot and beyond, is that a concern for you as we're flagging up?
I mean, I think the thing is, I try to beat any horse that's 4 to 5, but sometimes you just hold your hands up and say it's just not worth chasing it. And to me, there's just not a good alternative. Like, she doesn't even have to run her best race to win. So, she had a really hard race first time off the bench, and I do think sometimes she is probably going to regress, I would say, from a figure perspective. But with the regression, to me, she still wins. I wouldn't spend any money trying to beat her.
Okay. That's that then. Caravel, basically, is the way forward. Let's roll on to race number 9. It's over the mile 16th onto the dirt. And this, for the older horses, and I found this very confusing to get a handle on. You've got a few in here, like the likes of Played Hard, search Results, and a few others in here coming here off a break. And then you've got the likes of a horse like Society, who comes here with the benefit of a fitness run over a few of these. She's an obvious leader in here. Is this a race that's going to play out perfectly for her, JK, for a horse like Society in here?
I mean, Society is obviously a talented horse. I tried to get cute a couple times last year and pick her. I think that her setup race in the Madison last time just kind of, I don't think that was the goal. I think this was the goal. So I do think I wouldn't look at that race and just kind of be like, she didn't run that great. I think she actually ran sneaky good against Goodnight Olive, and I think that she can improve, and I'll have some savers on her. But you talk about search results. I think that one of Search Results' best races was her second on that racetrack in the Kentucky Oaks. She got beat by a champion in Malathot. We don't often get to see really, really talented horses race at 5. I think she'll take another step forward. Chad doesn't send out short horses. It's just he's not one of those guys like Baffert, like Todd, that give him one. He has, and I mean this, those guys, one of the things I think that they have is that they have control of their owners. And they tell their owners when they're going to run, because that's what they've established in their careers. So they don't have to show up because it's Oaks Day.
Right.
You know what I mean? He wants to run this horse here. He pointed this horse here, and he's not going to send over a short horse as a prep for a race at Belmont. I think Search Results is going to run a big race. I think this is a much more complicated race than just her. I mean, Secret Oath, I'm sorry, I'm just being honest. She annoys me for some reason. I don't know why.
She's so cool!
I know, but is she not a bit unlucky not to be 2 from 2 this year?
No, I mean, Claire Air, Claire nailed her last time, but I think if they raced every day, Claire Air would beat her 8 times out of the 10. I think Claire is a better horse. I'm not going to try to get beat by a Secret Oath, but the coach kind of gets a little aggressive, and he just shows up for all these spots, and they kind of start going the wrong way. And I feel like she's about to start one of those moves. So I wouldn't lean on her at all. I know she's run 2 big races. Search results for me will be the main focus. I'll have a little Society, who I think is interesting, and I want to just at least say played hard. I think Phil Bauer's an outstanding trainer, and I think she'll run well as well.
Okay, well, Philip, we'll go to you. We'll mix it up in this. Do you have a different way to play, or is the horses that he's already mentioned?
You know, I think I love when trainers like Lucas, he's just a throwback. I agree. He runs his horses. I think the fact that she actually had a freshening, which is something most of his horses don't typically get, and this is her 3rd start, it is back quick. To me, Clairiere is the top of the division. And if Clairiere was in here, she would be even money. So if this filly's anywhere near 3-1, I think you're getting Gaffleone, who's riding exceptionally well right now. You know, I would have her. I think Society is mildly intriguing. I think if Played Hard was somewhere other than the 1, and maybe Society would clear and Played Hard could sit second, I think it would change the tactics. But I think that filly drawn down to the inside, she's probably got to go. And does it make Society have to work a lot harder? Because I would agree, that race was clearly a prep. And you could see she just really stayed on. She just couldn't go with the sprinters. But to me, I'm going to lean heavily towards Secret Oath. I just think 3rd start off the layoff, she is coming back quick. You know, like I would say look for her now. I'm be trying to beat her the rest of the summer because I do think it weighs at some point.
And I do want to just say this about Phil Bauer. I think if you look at this race as if you were Phil Bauer, this is a huge race for him in his career. Right? He had an outstanding summer at Saratoga where people were talking about him. He's winning a lot of races at Saratoga. But like winning a Grade 1 on Oaks Day and beating a Chad Brown and beating a Lucas and beating an Asmussen, that's that whole thing where your phone starts ringing on Monday and next thing you know there's a couple of vans pulling up with more horses. I think he's going to have Played Hard ready to run well. I'm going to use played Hard quite a bit, but I do think Search Results is the most likely.
Different ways in, Peter? Anything else?
I'm Team Society in this race. I feel like the last race, it's been pointed out by both other panelists here, much more of a prep. And, you know, for whatever weird reason, Steve Asmussen, incredible as he is, the horses don't tend to do their best at Keeneland. I'm just sort of saying that she's really going to be in a position to get a great forward trip in this spot. I think she's going to prove the best speed, and I think that she's got back numbers that can win this race. I respect Secret Oath, just incredibly cool, tough horse, loves it around here. I do worry a little bit about where her position's going to be relative to pace, but I definitely want some 4s on my tickets. And then I also agree with Jonathan that Search Results fits on her best. I'm going to try to use all 3 of them and lock this race up and move along. And JK makes an intriguing point for Played Hard, and I'll tip my one of my many hats to him if she gets it done. It'd be a great story. I do like Phil Bauer as a trainer as well.
We love a good story, that's for sure. Let's move on to the Edgewood Stakes, guys. And JK, I'm going to come to you first. I mean, preliminary, when I was doing my research, like, she's this 1-from-1 horse. She's obviously massively upped in class. How good could she be off the 1 start? She was brought actually over in the UK at Book 1, which is our fancy sale for $250,000. She was sold by a chap called Jamie Railton, who's provided loads of good, classy winners around the globe to various different people. But the question is, she's the unknown in here. I love to start with the unknown because she could be anything, right? It's a cliche, but she could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a tough race. I mean, this race often is. Just because you know, there's a lot of horses that are still, you know, you get the 2 to 3 form, you get the 2 doesn't train on at 3 form. It makes these races very complicated. I can't think of too many times I've had a strong opinion outside of newspaper of record, and I still wake up in cold sweats about that bet.
There's a chalk outline of you on the 3rd floor, I think, from that day.
That was tough.
That was the newspaper record McKenzie double.
That was a nasty.
This is bringing back such bad memories for this man. Let's just move on.
But it
from this.
actually,
He's rubbing his
I have to say,
head.
it parlayed into an even worse bet because I started drinking after I lost that big wager, and then on the way home, I made a $10,000 wager with Craig Bernick. A 2-year-long wager, and I lost it in the last possible moment that I could with Serengeti Empress winning another Grade 1.
Okay, let's focus on the good times. Focus on the good times.
Preliminary, yeah, I mean, she could win. She got a fast-paced collapse. I would not lean on her. I would use her, but I wouldn't lean on her. She got a setup last time, and she might be nice, but I think there's a lot of other interesting horses. The other Chad Brown towards the inside, how are we pronouncing that?
Liguria.
Liguria.
You're marrying an Italian. You don't know how to say Liguria? Come on,
She's
Chad.
offended over here. She's absolutely furious.
Look, I can pronounce Jovanina, and that's about where it stops.
That's all that matters.
Liguria, you know, I will say this, and I talked about the kind of 2-year-old form into 3-year-old form. She ran numbers that are comparative to what these other horses have been running at 3 when she was 2. And Duke Matisse taught me this, one of the best horse players I know, that a 2-year-old to a 3-year-old number improvement you can expect on the Beyers scale is like 10 to 12. So if you look at her Beyers that she was running when she was 2, add 10 to 12, and then tell me how you feel about her. She's got Flavian drawn on the inside. I think Flavian's one of those guys, when I see him drawn on the grass inside, I get excited because he always seems to work out trips down there. He's super, super smart. He's aggressive when he needs to be. So I like her a lot. She'll be my top choice in here, but this is one of those races where if you're using less than 4 horses, you're significantly smarter than I am.
Give me a run of horses for our plus people, JK.
I'm definitely going to use the medallion horse, Papilio. I thought that horse was very, very impressive at Keeneland. I'll use that one. I'll use Mission of Joy. And let's see. I mean, this horse annoys me, but Cairo Consort could absolutely win at 5 to 2 and make you feel sick if you didn't use the horse.
Well, Philip, we should talk about Papilio here. Obviously has the UK form as well, over from Fozzie Stack. Few good runs over here since. What sort of give us the inside intel? Give us the word from right on the ground.
You know, I think the biggest thing is she's just been super green. You know, she had this tendency to want to lug in Europe, which I can discount sometimes, you know, for those that aren't that familiar. You know, the tracks aren't flat. They're not, you know, they
especially those Irish tracks. It's like running around a field with some sheep in the middle, quite literally, and you could get anything there.
So, you know, sometimes I'm like, well, if they can lug in, you know, it just could be they meet rising ground or there's undulations that they just don't handle. But she got in at Gulfstream and really cost herself the race. Dance Macabre came back and just won the stake at Churchill. And, you know, to me, she was just like Miles' best last time. Like, she was all over the place. Javier basically was just trying to keep her straight, and he never really got into her. Late on, like at the 16th pole, there was contact and ended up knocking her completely off stride. She still won. She's doing really well. This is, again, it's a super competitive race. I think after this, what you find is like some of these horses really just want to go a mile, and then some will stretch out. So the field or this division will kind of split a little bit, and you'll have horses that want to stay at a mile, some that will stretch out to a mile and a quarter. You know, to me, she's got a huge shot. I was hoping coming in from Keeneland, I was like, I'd love to run against all those horses again. You know, the horse that I'm worried about a lot is the 10. Like, when I look at this race, I don't see a ton of speed. And we'll get to how people feel about Botanical later. But this filly got a perfect trip when she broke her maiden on the grass. She aired when she got a perfect trip in the allowance. She ran second behind a horse that's probably going to be maybe second choice in the Oaks. And to me, the only horse to me that looks like they have any speed is Cox's other horse. And you know they're not going to hook up. So she, to me, is very dangerous if she is as good on the grass as she is on synthetic. You know, I wish maybe we were drawn a little bit more down inside. I think what we found after the first race was that she probably needs to get covered up. She was pretty rank, ended up going super wide on both turns, which on the grass is like a death sentence in America. And she still almost won. And I think last time we got her covered up, and it was just a matter of keeping her on a straight pass. I mean, I think she got a huge shot. It's a very competitive race.
Okay. Last question to you, sorry, Philip. What would you genuinely be happy with? Obviously, everyone wants to win a race, but I mean, if she's in the first 4, is that a good result for you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, what I think, when you look at races like this, and it was the same in the Appalachian, I said, hey, these are like the best 3-year-old fillies that have run this year.
Yeah.
And we might run really good and run 5th.
Yeah.
That narrative doesn't really change. Like,
okay.
The key, I think, for us is I just want to see her in the clear because I know she's got a huge turn of foot.
Yeah.
You know, she won her last quarter in under, you know, like 23 seconds in the last race. So to me, I just want to get her clear in the lane and let her come running and hope she's good enough.
Is she a you know, Belmont, Milan?
Yeah, I think pedigree wise, like Star Spangled Banner, the stallion, his best horse was State Arrest, who was a 10 furlong horse on in like 4 countries.
World traveler.
And she's out of a high chaparral mare. So to me, she is going to handle 10 furlongs now. I say that until they have to go do it. And I think the key was last time she relaxed, we got her cover and she settled. The first race, which was her first race in September, at Gulfstream, she didn't settle. She was pulled, and there's no way she'd get 10 furlongs doing that. So I think if you get her covered up, I think she got every shot to get 10. I think the other thing is, like, you know, the good thing for us, just for all you guys here, now that she's got her graded stakes win, we can be as aggressive as we want chasing G1s, or we could just try to go smash a bunch of purses, depending on where she fits.
You're in a great position with
yeah,
that. You
but
can play
if we would have gotten, we only won by a head. It was, to me, the margin was way more than that. But if we would have lost by a head, you really don't have as much flexibility just in how you manage the horse going forward. And what I would say is, like, a lot of that is Cassie deciding those options, not me, but.
Okay, and Peter, over to you as a last word here. We haven't mentioned like a horse like Mission of Joy. I know loads of these are on an upward trajectory. When I was sort of doing a deep dive on the form, like her trajectory really is pointing in the right direction. Yeah. Could she take another step forward here?
That's funny. If you hadn't teed me up for Mission of Joy, that's the one I would have talked about outside the ones we've talked about already.
Yeah. I promise you we didn't.
My note exactly is Mission of Joy just keeps getting better, and I could see her flying late under Rosario. I definitely want some 6s on tickets. Papilio we've talked about a lot. Totally agree with Phillip. Much the best coming out of that common race. Just not an easy go of things. I could see a move forward. Flashy Gem, I really like getting back to turf. Has that speed to be in great position for world-class connections at what should be a good price. And Liguria, I thought I was out there for the Durante at Del Mar, and you know it was the kind of thing where just watching that race absolutely looked like a future Grade 1 winner. I want 9, 10, 2, 6, and that might not be going deep enough. It's a competitive race.
It is indeed. Let's move on to the Kentucky Oaks, guys. This is the big one, obviously, on Friday, and it's much more wide open than the Derby is on Saturday. Nearly made
You're gonna mess up here before we're done.
Yeah, don't you worry about that. But this is a much more competitive event, as is often the case. There doesn't seem to be an absolute standout. Is that fair to say, JK, in terms of, like, when you're looking at this particular running of the Oaks, is this what you would consider a vintage renewal, or what are you expecting from the renewal as a whole?
It's tricky because I think there's a standout, but it's like most of the time there's a standout who's like running triple-digit buyers and is just like better than everyone else.
Yeah.
I think there is a standout. She's not as like there's not a huge gap in speed figures, but I am impressed with one thing about Wet Paint, which is the fact that she's won 3 races in a row as a deep closer, and like that doesn't happen.
And all of them by pretty handily. Like it wasn't like she just got up.
And without great setups.
Yeah, and like I think that like a lot of times when it comes to closers, which is like I'm actually almost allergic to them. They drive me insane because they make these big runs and they get stopped or they get wide and then they get beat by some 48-1 speed horse and it's annoying. But like Wet Paint continues to overcome being a closer. It's why we all fell in love with Zenyatta. The fact that she kept winning despite those trips that she was getting and the paces she was closing into. It's exciting. And she looks beat all the time and she keeps winning. I think she's the best in this class, and I think that she'll win. My
heart kind of goes out to the ones who make it so much harder for themselves than it probably needs to be, because ultimately she's probably got a huge engine in there, but her running style just dictates that she's making life so hard for herself.
Yeah, and Flavian's got a ton of confidence in her because he keeps getting there on her, right? Yeah. And it's a big field with some no-hopers, so the pace should be at least honest because someone's going to say the only way we can win is if we wire, and they're going to go and they're going to send, and if it rains, that's not a problem for her. No pun with her name, but she does enjoy moisture in the racetrack. If she doesn't win, if she finally does get unlucky and get stopped, I think it's a little bit more wide open. I think Botanical's interesting, switching to the dirt for the first time, being, bred as a dirt type, but just finding herself on the synthetic. And then South Lawn is another one that I'll mention, who I think is interesting. The word on the streets is that there was a throat surgery 3 races back in between, and she's undefeated since that. So I think if you could ignore what she did in the past and just look at what she's done in her last 2 starts, she becomes significantly more interesting. So I think she's interesting, but I'm going to be a majority of my money is going to be going through Wet Paint, but I will have some others like Botanical and South Lawn as backup.
Okay, obviously, Phillip, you have the interest here with Promise Her America, but you have to look at this with a sort of non-biased view, if you can possibly. How are you viewing the race as a whole in terms of depth and class? Are you as keen on one as JK is, or do you think it's a much more wide open affair?
I think Wet Paint is definitely the horse to beat. I would be against Botanical. To me, a horse that is on synthetic at Turfway, it's a huge class right now. Flashy Jim goes and wins by 4. Maybe I'll change it, but to me, I think Brad's pretty sharp, and it took this filly 3 starts to break her maiden. I thought she ran well enough at Keeneland, but all of it's been at Turfway, and I just question the form. And to me, it's just because she's going to be an unbettable price for me. Like, she would have to be 10-1 for me to want to just take a gamble that she's going to run big on the dirt in a race that has other speed. Like, the 10, I think sometimes you see these turf horses or synthetic horses that when they can control it their own way on dirt, they might be able to do it. But when they start having to get kickback and all that stuff, those are horses I want no part of at a short price. And to me, she might be fast enough early, but she's going to have to absolutely run. I think that just sets it up for somebody else. I think the thought process, like just for us, for Promise Her America, she already is a grade 3 winner. She already has this built-in residual. She's run, what I would say long, although at a one-turn, it's a one-turn mile at Aqueduct. She's run it 2 turns once, and she really won pretty convincingly in the Gazelle. Now, I don't think the Gazelle was the strongest prep race. What I try to do is identify, like, what do I think was the strongest division of horses, and try to really focus on that. And I think historically, the stuff coming out of Fairgrounds has really performed the best when it comes to the Oaks long term. And I think Southlawn is absolutely like a horse. What I'm worried about is I think Southlawn could be like 4-1. I mean, I think she could. If you ask people up there who's training great, it's like every day you check out Mike Welsh and all he's talking about is Southlawn every time. So to me, I think she just looks like a filly that's getting really good right now. I saw the same thing JK thought. And anytime that a horse gets a layoff, comes back with this reversal, you have to, that has to enter your mind, especially because like they bet this filly first time out. So they thought she was good. It just never materialized. In my mind, it's just a wide open race because nobody has separated themselves yet. Like JK said, normally you get to the Oaks and there are 3 or 4 horses that are just considerably faster than everybody else. And in here, Botanical actually is the fastest horse. But Wet Paint, like if I just compared her to Promise Her America, she's 7 points faster. Now she's way more accomplished. They have a common horse in their race record. Actually, I did a tour for Nick Tamero, who does the morning line at Keeneland, and I don't envy them because that's got to be like the most impossible job ever. But if you look, like we beat Gambling Girl. Gambling Girl's half our price, and we beat her really pretty easily. Like you have Affirmative Lady, who's 10-1, and there's a bunch of similar horses in the form line, and we actually performed better against all those horses than she did. So, yeah, the morning line is just it's a factor of one person's opinion.
I was going to make that point. I was going to
make
make that point if you didn't, Phillip. Also, like if you look at international betting, Promise Her America is about half what the morning line is. I mean, she goes with a chance for sure.
And I was going to make the point, if you care about the morning line, you need to reevaluate your life.
You just say, we just got to get you into more ownership, JK, because then when you own the horses,
I wasn't talking about you guys. I'm talking about the people who complain on Twitter about the morning line.
Oh, yeah. It's an impossible.
Okay.
It's the stupidest thing in the world. But I will say this about Botanical. Botanical kind of reminds me, the Brad Cox thing. You said that Brad Cox is sharp, and he is very sharp. Here's my thought about Botanical. It kind of reminds me of like the Joe Burrow thing, how like he was at Ohio State, and they have so much talent there that when you have so much talent, sometimes because you have someone who's just a little bit more forward, you can mistakenly evaluate someone else. And I think that might have been what happened with Botanical. I think he had all these other monsters in his barn, and he said, let's try turf for this one because she's not that good. And then, let's try her the synthetic. And then it's like, oh, now she's gotten really good, and I think we don't know what she'll do on the dirt. I think it just might have been one of those Joe Burrow type things.
Well, can I just ask, I mean, Affirmative Lady has already been mentioned here. Am I missing something with her? I just feel as though she doesn't have like the sexy profile of a few horses in here, but she's been a bit of a slow burner, and she's coming to the boils, surely, when it matters most for the biggest day. I mean, she was thrown into a grade 2 at Gulfstream. She has the blinkers applied. They'll be on again. Like, am I missing something?
I just didn't think the race was fast enough, honestly.
Okay.
And I think this is a
That's Peter very gently saying, yes, Vanessa, you are definitely missing something here.
Well, it was a perfect trip in a slow race, and I feel like then coming back in a tough post, you're supposed to bet against those horses. But at the same time, with these connections, I wouldn't blame anybody for throwing in. But what I really want to know is if you have any idea who Joe Burrow is.
Absolutely no. No.
He plays soccer.
Soccer? Is that football or is that American football? I'm so confused. I've been confused over here all week so far, so this is just adding to the confusing.
Let me throw in a couple of quick long shots. I'm Team Wet Pain in here, but there's just a couple of prices I'd feel remiss in not to mention. I feel like the Alice look is kind of interesting off that Silver Bullet day run, and I felt like you could conjure an excuse for the last day because I thought ground loss really mattered and that she was wide. And just like looking at workouts, she's been working really well in company with Wet Paint. I thought she was maybe an interesting live long shot. And another one I'll throw out there as a price to mix in with Wet Paint, and not just because I'm a huge Star Wars geek and it's almost May 4th, but the 12 runner Darth Vader, I feel like looked visually maybe like the distance isn't going to be her friend after the last race, but she was so good two back. There's a world in which they just send from this outside draw, and she could prove the best of the speed. And this is another one who just in workouts looks to be peaking physically. I think they're going to both be huge prices to maybe mess around with. And you know what? I'll chime in on the botanical debate since we've gone back and forth on her. I feel like the issue with her, looking at her blood, guys, is that Brad Cox always knew she wanted more ground, and that's why she started long on the turf. Not because she was turf or not that good, but because he knew she needed ground. I think she's a little bit interesting to mess around with in this spot as a horse who could be
I think to me the question is, because I agree, that's what happens a lot of times. A lot of these things run on the grass first time so they can run long, because there are no two-turn dirt races until the middle of September. So if you know that you want distance, you almost have to run on grass. Yeah. To me, like, what price is she? And I think one thing, like, I've learned a lot even from JK is just, he'll even talk sometimes these races, like, he just wants the best speed horse and the best closing horse and a lot of stuff. To me, I can't envision what kind of trip she gets where she wins.
Okay.
Somebody should be better in one direction or the other.
Right. Yeah, like, I just think
she falls between two
To me,
places.
I think there's too much speed in there for her to get the lead.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be completely convinced. She's drawing 6. There's speed outside of her. If she has to tuck in and take dirt the whole way,
she's not going to like that.
And it sets up, then I think Wet Paint is just like, to me, I wouldn't have $1 on Botanical winning. She might be the best horse in the race, but like, it's like, what price do you think she is?
Oh, it's a tough guess.
I'm horrible at this game. This is also why I made that comment earlier about you are also horrible at that game. Everyone else. So why is people getting mad at the morning line? I mean, I think they're going to bet Wet Paint. I think people love ones and they see ones, and I think they're going to bet Botanical because they love ones and they see ones.
Currently 6-1
Everyone
internationally.
loves a one. Everyone loves a one next to a horse's name. It's just a fact of life. You can't avoid those sexy profiles. It happens all the time.
I mean, maybe 3-1 at the lowest. I don't think she's going shorter than that. I think the line's probably pretty good.
What was the morning line? 6s? 4s?
4s, yeah.
6 internationally, so maybe split the difference. I'll guess.
What do they know?
Okay, what's that?
Nothing.
Stop being nasty to me, JK. We're friends.
He said international. I said, what do they know?
Hey, lordy lord. Before we wrap up, we're about to go for a very quick interval so you can all get an extra drink before we get stuck into the Derby.
Ooh, that counts.
Derby.
I
It doesn't
heard a
count.
dar.
Check swing.
It doesn't count. It doesn't count. It doesn't count. Before we do, just a quick mention, Phillip, to Curl Girl in race 12. Do you want to add anything what's already been said about her? She obviously runs in that race.
Yeah, I think Mark covered it, pretty good. This is a filly that D'Amato was super high on last year as a 2-year-old. She broke from the rail in her first start and just did not take the kickback. She was overwhelmed. She dropped back. Once she got in the clear, she ended up running on a little bit. But she ran in a pretty strong race at Santa Anita, and she came to Keeneland first time out and really opened up and won. The goal's always been to get her around 2 turns. She comes back a little bit quick. I think that's the only question.
Okay.
If, I'd say from the rail we'll be pretty aggressive and just put her in the race. And to me, she got a huge shot. She's doing really good. So.
Look forward to it. Exciting times. Right, that wraps up part 1, guys. Obviously, 10-minute interval, is it?
Yeah, we'll do 10 minutes. If you're watching on the live stream, we'll be back in that time. And if you're here in the room, we've got a raffle happening any minute. So, yeah, we'll be back in a minute or 10.
Just getting on the old. I've been to Necker Island.
Really?
A lot.
Where's it at?
Hello and welcome to the In the Money Media Tailor-Made Partnerships Medallion Racing Kentucky Derby Final Answer Show. We are live here at Malone's in Lexington, Kentucky with a great audience. Very excited to go over this Derby Day Pick 6 with you. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatel. I'm not your host. I will throw it to our actual host. That is the great Vanessa Ryle.
The great. I love that. Real hype word there. Thanks, Peter. He's had too many whiskeys, everyone. And I didn't even pay him to say that. We are kicking on with Saturday's racing, guys. And again, we're going to build up to the Derby itself. And we are going to start with race 7. Race 7, so turn your pages to race 7. It's the Twin Spires Turf Sprint Stakes. It's a grade 2. It's over the 5.5 furlongs. And who shall we start with? Philip. I think we'll mix it. Oh, no. Peter.
No, go with
Philip,
Philip.
let's mix it up because I've got to focus in on some European interest. This is the only time on the whole of the 2 race cards that we've got a bit of European interest in Go Bears Go, given the fact that he's having his first run for Wesley Ward, having left, obviously, David Lott-Naines. Ammo Racing, they like to mix up their ownership with England, Ireland, over here in America as well. And they left him over here after the Breeders' Cup. Does he have any chance at all in here, Philip?
You know, I'd never discount Wesley in a turf sprint, but to me, this horse is hard to find.
Damn it.
He looks kind of like a horse to me that I'm not sure how much he trained on as an older horse. It was a very good 2-year-old, just kind of, was a cut below the top level in Europe. And I think this is maybe the only division on grass where normally the American horses in America have the upper hand.
Yeah.
I will give you a little one. I like Matorius, the 11, who is a former Euro. This horse has gotten good for D'Amato. He's won 3 of his last 4 races. He comes from off. I think the biggest question for me is last 3 races are down the hill at Santa Anita. He's got to cut back to 5.5 here, but I like him the last race, set a little bit closer to the pace. Maybe he doesn't have to be completely out of it. You get Pratt, which I think is a huge positive. And in my mind, D'Amato is, he's like the West Coast Chad Brown when it comes to the grass. It just his horses. I think he won the Del Mar training title one year and he won 1 dirt race. So he's an unbelievable trainer. So that's where I ended up landing. I think the price. I like Big Invasion. We talked in the Oaks version about this horse just loves to win. He got beat in his debut, and then he got beat at Kentucky Downs, which is a very unique surface. So I really like Big Invasion. But to me, if Motorius is 8-1, this horse is 7-2. I think their chances of winning are similar. So I'd rather go with the bigger price.
Okay, yeah, Matorius, he got a star next to my notes as well. What about JK? A horse like Arrest Me Red in here obviously doesn't maybe have the 1s next to his name. We've already referenced how everyone latches on to lots of 1s next to a horse's name. He maybe doesn't have that sort of sexy profile, but he's been in some very competitive races of late, and he's run pretty decent races as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think in this race you kind of need a sexy profile because I think there's 3 really, really good horses in here. So I don't need Arrest Me Red on anything. When Wesleys are good, they're good. They show up. They run every time.
Yeah.
And the ones that are inconsistent are the ones I try to beat because they're always bet. Especially here in Kentucky. People get very excited about Wesley sprinting on the turf, and they bet them all like they can't lose. We saw it today in the stake today. There's 2 horses, and they're both still running. And that's not against Wesley. It's just they either, they're the Golden Pals of the world that show up and run every time, and or they're not. And I don't need a Rest Me Red. Motorius I'll definitely use. It's a little bit tricky because this horse got really good down the hill. Yeah. 6.5 down the hill is more like a mile. This is like an actual true turf sprint. But California turf sprinters do really, really well on the East Coast. And so I don't want to dismiss that horse. It's got fast numbers. I'll use Motorius.
East Coast, where do you think you are?
Well, I'm from Texas. That's the South. I know you guys, this is kind of South too, but just kind of. Nothing Better, I'll definitely use as well. I thought the horse ran extremely well at Aqueduct last time, going 6 furlongs. And I think the style of this horse, the cutback's going to help quite a bit. Those 2 horses that I mentioned already, those are triple-digit buyer types. But I wanted to try to single Big Invasion, but it's just too much. I got to have those other 2.
I did too.
I will say this about Big Invasion. On August 14th, when he won at Saratoga as a 3-year-old, I remember on air saying that Golden Pal, when Golden Pal was a monster at the time, I said he better bring his running shoes to the Breeders' Cup because this might be the best turf sprinter in the country. And he ended up kind of going sideways, and he had to take some time. He came back going a flat 5, which is not his style at all. If you can close going a flat 5 at Gulfstream Park on a turf sprint, you're a monster. And I think that Big Invasion is likely a monster. It's just, as a closer, I can't lean on him. I got to use the other 2. But I think Big Invasion is a very, very likely winner of this race. And I actually think he's a likely winner of the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint.
This is another horse you could see make a trip over across the pond if he were to run big. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Love that. We love the internationals.
Shout out Dean Reeves with a top hat and tails.
Yeah.
You guys don a top hat and tails pretty well. Trust me.
I honestly haven't gone because I don't know if it would fit on my head.
Hey, I've got a huge head, and they definitely got one big enough for you.
Yeah, don't worry. They make sizes to fit all men. Trust me. You're all right over there.
We'll get you like a magician style one if it all goes wrong.
JK at the Breeders' Cup. That's at Royal Ascot. That's got to happen.
That's
got to happen. You got me out to the Breeders' Cup, so it's like it's a 2-way street.
Turnabout's fair play.
I'm in.
Yeah. Come on. You've got a wedding to focus on this year, but maybe next year. Peter, what about you? Do you think that this horse is as much of a monster Big Invasion as JK is talking him up to be?
I mean, I had a similar reaction thinking this horse was a serious contender for the Breeders' Cup Sprint, so certainly an A-level contender here. But on top, I landed with the number 7, Nothing Better, as a horse who I just thought was possibly the best speed. I love the run at Aqueduct. I think this horse is ready for his close-up. I'm not anti-Arrest Me Red, though, and I guess the main thing for me was I just thought the run last time was maybe a little bit better than it looked, running really well wide off the layoff. I thought this horse is supposed to improve, and I do think on his best he fits. And then, yeah, Big Invasion has to be an A-level contender. And then I get the case for Motorius. And the 3-runner as well, I thought on the best day had a shot. I'm very spready in here, but my top pick is number 7, Nothing Better.
Okay. Nothing Better it is. Let's roll on to race number 8 on Saturday. This is the Pat Day Mile Stakes. It's a grade 2. It's over the mile. And in here, I mean, should we start with? Is the place to start with Fort Bragg, bringing in the Forte form for the Derby a little bit later? Is that the place?
The what? For the what?
Was that it?
That's 2 now. That's 2.
Oh.
That's 20 pounds. I got to check what the conversion rate is on 20 pounds.
20 pounds. It was definitely pounds.
Yeah, it's about $26.
Oh, no. That's a real error. Okay. The Forte Derby form is brought in here with Fort Bragg. And JK, that was my starting point here. He's been swimming in some pretty deep waters for this team this year.
Yeah, and he...
Oh, no. You sound uninspired. Come on.
He wants the cup back.
I was going to be mean, but I like all the owners. He's just
Go
not
on,
that.
be mean,
He's
be
not
mean.
that good. Fort Bragg. Look, I think that he showed some talent, but his speed figures just aren't that fast. And I think the thing about the Pat Day Mile is that this is the race where I think connections start to get realistic, where they have, as they should have Derby aspirations, and they're trying to get to the Derby, and they're trying to find a way to get their horse to go 1.25 miles. As you should, and I would do the same thing. And I think this is the point in which you say, maybe not for us. Let's try this.
A second rater is what you're saying.
And so there's a lot of horses in here. Not even a second rater,
it's more
though.
about the distance,
More
right?
of a distance thing. And I think that and also maybe a second rater, but more about the distance thing. And Fort Bragg is not the type of horse at any point where I've just started saying, oh, he just needs shorter. I just think he's not probably that top level. So I look for horses that I feel like this distance is going to hit him right between the eyes. And there's a lot of them in here that I feel like, are the types that should appreciate that. A horse like Damon's Mound, who was so impressive sprinting young and then tried to stretch out. That didn't go well. And then oddly came back in a turf race, but I think that was probably just a prep for a spot like this. I think he's interesting.
Big price?
Yeah, and the horse that has my attention, though, I'm going to spread in here. I'm going to use as many possible horses as I can. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I will talk about one that I like the most, which is Kangaroo Court.
Yes.
Right, this is a Calbred who has a lot of tactical speed. The races Kangaroo Court has been running in have been productive with other horses that are running fast numbers. And one thing I will say about Kangaroo Court is I'm a big believer in pace figures. If you look at the form, you see that final number, that speed figure, that tells you how fast a horse ran. It's kind of like a quarterback rating in football. The higher, the better. The higher, the faster. Pace figures are the same way. They're just at different calls during the race. Kangaroo Court's pace figures are extremely fast. I mean, that horse uses a lot of energy early, but he's still even. He doesn't go really fast and slow down. He goes really fast and he kind of stays really fast. Those are the types of stretch outs that I like. I think Kangaroo Court from the inside with a Hall of Famer in Johnny Velasquez will send away from there, and it's going to look a lot like 2004 with Johnny sitting on a Todd Pletcher rocket from the inside, and I think the Kangaroo Court's going to be extremely hard to beat. And if I was a little bit more brave, I would single him. But I think this is a race where you have to use a lot of horses. Just too many questions.
Name check some other numbers at least for the plus numbers.
I mean, I'll use Echo again. General Jim, I think, is interesting. Gilmore is a little sneaky. Gun Pilot. I mean, like I said, and Damon's Mound, who I already mentioned. I'm going to spread around in here, but I will press up Kangaroo Court.
Okay, keenness on Kangaroo Court, but two of the horses that you mentioned there, Echo again, Asmussen looking to win this race again. Surely this is, again, kind of much deeper waters, Peter, than what he's been swimming in. And then, like, a horse like General Jim, who just seems so versatile, like trip, ground, track, dirt, turf. But is the mile on the dirt what he really wants to be seen to best effect, which he'll have to be to win this race?
I have them both, Echo Again and General Jim, on my short list. Echo Again, for me, looks like could be the best speed. I'm a little bit worried, though, because there is other pace and no Lasix for Echo Again this time. From another barn, I would probably be a little dismissive, but, in Steve Asmussen we trust is not typically a bad motto at Churchill Downs. For me, General Jim might eventually be better as a turf horse, and I don't want to give too much credit out of the last 5-horse race, but he's very confidently placed from a great trainer. I'm going to have General Jim on all tickets, but I'll give you one. I'll give you an off-the-wall horse in here.
Go on, love an off-the-wall horse.
The number 3, Lugan Knight, I think you can include. As far back as the Jerome, I remember thinking about him as a horse that was going to cut back and be interesting in a race like the Pat Day Mile. I remember thinking that physically this looked like a horse that wanted, no more than a mile. And then the Lafayette, it was a very tough trip and a loaded race. Horse did not get over the surface at all, the sealed track in the Gotham. I think this horse, if you look at the races 3 and 4 back, can come into focus as a potential contender and one who could be sitting on a peak effort for a trainer who I don't want to say underrated because I think people appreciate how good Mike McCarthy is, but I think Lugan Knight's live in here at 20-1, and I'll be definitely focusing some play on him.
Okay, big price selection. What about you, Philip? Have you got anything to match that in terms of big price swing?
I liked Damon's Mound a little bit. I think this race, like this year, I think some years you get a horse like Jack Christopher or just a horse that, like JK said, is a grade 1 level horse but just does not want any part of a mile and an eighth. And this year it feels like this race is a lot more wide open. Damon's Mound, when he broke his maiden at Churchill, I mean, it was like, it was incredibly impressive. He went up and beat Gulfport, who, was absolutely dominant in his first couple of starts. And it just didn't go right for him at Churchill, stretching out to 2 turns. Like the last race to me is a complete prep for this. In a race where I think it's pretty wide open, I think you could do a lot worse than coming up with a bomb. And I think the 14 even is mildly intriguing. He broke his maiden on the course and distance. went to Turfway, didn't handle the synthetic. Only got beat 3 lengths by Corona Bolt or Hijazi, who would both be even money in here. And he's a huge number. I don't know what kind of trip he's going to work out, but again, the mile race, it's a one-turn race. I'd be just super spread in here, but I think those two are really interesting at a big number.
Any other numbers you want to name check?
No, I think Echo again's the horse to beat. I think this is probably the right distance. He was super impressive at Saratoga. He's been bet like a sure thing in all of his starts. I take what you said with Lasix, into account. To me, he's the horse to beat, and I'd be leaning most heavily to him. But I think this race could get crazy. I think there was a couple of years ago, there was like a Calumet horse that was like you could never have even after the race that won.
Sean Borman had it. What was that horse called?
Yeah, it was like Funny Bird or something.
Funny Duck.
Funny duck.
But yes.
Okay, should we move on? Everyone ready to move on? Race number 9, the American Turf Stakes. It's a Grade 2, and there's loads of unknowns in here for the 3-year-olds on the turf, and you've got, at the top, the likes of Far Bridge, who's 2 from 2, one of the unknowns in here, now with Todd Pletcher for his 3rd start. What are we expecting of him? But also Major Dude. It's only right, actually, we should hand over to our very own Major Dude for this race. Look at that. That was such a sweet segue.
That was very
Come
nice.
on, that's why you pay me the big bucks to be here.
Yeah. Look, I'm a huge fan. I've been waiting for this horse to run. I know they scratched at Keeneland, Carl Spackler, because of the draw. And in full disclosure, I love E5 racing. I love Bob Edwards. But I was following this horse because...
You're a big Caddyshack fan.
Yeah, I had to ask him. I didn't even know. I was born in '82, Pete. I was too young. I know
82.
Yeah.
I'm a 90s baby.
Are you?
Yeah.
You have an actual millennial on the panel here, not a fake one like you, Jacob.
Yeah, wow.
Go on,
But
go on.
I think one thing that I've always recognized, and I know that I'm not comparing her at all, I'm just saying in general, I know they wore the same silks, but Rushing Fall, who is a horse for Chad who had speed, that still kicks home. Regal Glory had speed for Chad, kicks home. In Italian, who I think is the best older mare in racing, has speed, kicks home. Carl Spackler has speed. It's a Chad Brown type. You're in the clear. This horse isn't going to get stopped. I think Carl Spackler is a very likely winner. I'm not saying that the price is going to be right. The horse is likely going to be overbet considering the post and how things have to work. But when you have a horse like this, then a lot of things can kind of work out in your favor. When you have tactical speed, you always hear how, that horse keeps getting a good trip. Well, that horse keeps making a good trip. I don't really need Major Dude. I get it. I get it. You get Irad, you get Todd, you're drawn inside, should be able to save some ground, but people are a little excited, I think, over that synthetic race, and the horse can win. I'm excited about Carl Spackler. This is not a race that I think is as straightforward as that. I think you probably have to use some horses defensively. It's turf racing. And the last thing I'll say is we still don't, and I'll talk about it a little bit more when we get to the big turf race, the Turf Classic. The last time a lot of these horses were running at Churchill, the turf course was jacked up. And I think we've seen that it seems to be okay, but when the rails come down, that turf course can get biased. And it can be, and especially if it rains. If it rains at any point between now and Friday, the inside traditionally has gotten horrible. So you have to keep an eye on that. Watch the earlier races and watch good horses and see where they end up and see how they run. If a good horse ends up on the rail and runs bad, you have to pay attention to that. So I want to just say that disclaimer. If the rail ends up bad, then I hate Major Dude. But it could be vice versa too, so just pay attention.
Okay, so playing it right to the wire in terms of just waiting to see how the day, the weather, etc. pans out. Got to take it all into consideration.
Yeah, because it can get funny. It can absolutely get funny, that turf course. And you just have, and it's new, so we don't know what it's going to happen, but traditionally it can.
It's a good red flag, that, to bear in mind. We all need a red flag in our lives. That's a good one. Peter, over to you here. Are you sort of approaching these sort of races with a bit of trepidation, as JK is at this stage, or have you got a confident selection?
I wouldn't say confident. You always have to pay attention when it comes to things like bias, and it is true. There is some rain in the forecast, and we've seen the big dead turf rail on these days before. But, you know, my attitude is I'm just going to evaluate it as it lays and then sort of adjust on the fly. I think that's usually the best thing to do with bias. And I'm definitely supportive of the Carl Spackler idea. Would be no Cinderella story. This is a well-hyped horse who notched one of the easier wins you're going to ever see last time, but still made it look impressive. I think can reverse form with Far Bridge from that first race. And while the post isn't easy, Carl Spackler definitely an A-level contender. I did put the 4-runner Talk of the Nation above Carl Spackler in my rankings, though. This just feels like a very typical, excellent Shug McGahee training job. This horse brought along slowly, ready to maybe peak in the big spot. On the clock and the eye, this horse has been very impressive. And honestly, I could see this one vying for favoritism based on the known form and figs, you know, hype aside. So I'll have a lot of 4 and 11. I can't avoid the 2-runner Far Bridge. Been privately purchased, I'm guessing, since the last. Beat Carl Spackler on debut. Doesn't have some particular figure advantage, but just a horse that I want to use. And, you know, I have respect for Major Dude. And then I also have respect for the 5-runner, Johannes. This horse looked very good the last day. And, you know, yes, it was a 4-horse race last time, so you could be cynical about that form, but the 1 horse to come back and run was the last place finisher and improved the figure by 10. I'm going to leave in the mix at long odds, so I'm a little bit spready here. I'll press up the 4 and the 11, and I'll use the 2, 5, and 1 in my horizontals on this Derby Day wager.
Plenty of darts at the board. That's what we're here for. Philip, you were kind of nodding along there when JK was talking. I wasn't sure in what part you were agreeing with. Was it his selections here, or was it the reference to we don't know quite how the ground's going to play out, draw, etc.
Yeah.
Best place to be?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the whole turf course situation at Churchill has been well documented, and I think it's impossible to really know what's going to happen. The inside is definitely bad when it gets wet. I don't know if you remember when Enable won the Breeders' Cup and they were out in the middle of the course, which is something that you guys have a lot in Europe. It almost never happens here. I kind of liked Webslinger a little bit. I think there's a ton of speed in here, and I think he could project to get a really good trip sitting. He's going to have to probably take all the way back from the outside, which I don't necessarily love, but he had an impossible trip last time. He was super wide at a pretty critical point. You know, I wouldn't be like way against Carl Spackler. I think the fact that, you know, he rated well last time, I think he could end up maybe just tucking right in behind the speed. But I thought Webslinger was interesting. I actually remember, like, he ran in the Colt version of the race Papilio ran in, and Castellano rode both of them, and they both broke from post 2. And he ran the day before and was like 8 wide on the turn, and I was like, oh, no, we have no shot tomorrow. This is a terrible ride. We're going to get a repeat performance tomorrow. And then he literally saved every inch of ground, tipped us out in the lane. I was like, I'm an idiot. So, but I think this horse is just intriguing, just given the way the pace could play out.
Okay, let's move on to the first of 3 Grade 1 races we're going to be talking about. Obviously, getting to the Derby in due course. Let's kick off with the 7 furlong race on the dirt, and we get to see Cody's Wish here, obviously off since his brilliant Breeders' Cup dirt mile victory. Down to the 7 furlongs now, but he's a class act in here. This is his seasonal reappearance. He's got an incredible win record, in fairness to him. This brilliant story behind him that seemed to sort of sweep across the nation, get people really engaged in the sport, and rightly so. Are we worried about him on reappearance, JK, at this trip, or is he just better than some of these horses in here?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's better than these horses, and I'll talk about the layoff. I mean, I think that a Godolphin-bred horse will win. I mean, I think Endorsed could win. He's not owned by Godolphin anymore, bred by Godolphin. But I will say this about Cody's Wish, and I was talking to my friend Sean about it earlier, is like the layoff is the big question. But you got to think, if you're Godolphin and you have a horse who is a 5-year-old who comes in off a Breeders' Cup win, you've got all the money in the world, you've got all the mares in the world, you're going to support your stallion. Like, why bring him back to run 3rd in a Grade 1 because he needs one? Like, I see them coming back to try to solidify what he can be as a stallion. And to me, the only way you do that is you come in and you win a race like this, and then you wheel back in the Met Mile and you win that race. and then you try to do something cool and stretch him out in the Whitney, and now you've got a serious stallion that other people are going to try to get to.
Sort of like aggressive campaigning now this year.
I just don't see Bill Mott sending him over there to give him one and set him up for the Met Mile on the biggest day of racing in this country.
I'm not here for a holiday, is what we've said in England.
Sheikh Mo, we're just going to give him one. Talk soon. I think the horse will be ready to run.
Said no one ever, yes.
And I think it'll be hard to beat. And I will say this, and I'll just encourage you all to look at this in all racing, but especially in this race. This is a race where Lasix matters. And if you look at horses in this race, you'll see a ton of horses that run really fast on Lasix and a ton of horses that run really slow without them. And I think you should, when you're looking at it, evaluate it. I think one to take into consideration to start with is White Barrio. He got that big number last time with Lasix. And then 7 races back, he's got another nice race with Lasix. I think a lot of these horses need it. And just to be clear, Cody's Wish's last 4 monstrous races were without Lasix.
Okay, interesting. So you're taking that into consideration. Any other swings away from that? No? We can move on?
Ice cold. Me and Sheikh Mo.
Ice cold, you and Sheikh Mo. I'd say Cody's Wish is low on Sheikh Mohammed's worried list at the moment, to be honest with you. But it's a controversial thing to say around here. Peter, we'll go to you next in here. How do you want to play this? Like, if you're looking at a horse like Tejano Twist, seems to make life so hard for himself. He gives himself so much to do. Like, he's such a, I just want, again, it's like what I was saying earlier. He starts slowly and then he makes life so tough for himself. It's like, it could be easier, pal. It could be so much easier.
A horse like that needs the right kind of setup, and I'm just not sure it's going to appear here. And I also never like to take a horse that needs to come from far back when you have a horse like Cody's Wish, who is going to be so much benefited from the same kind of race shape. So for me, this is all about Cody's Wish, and not just because I'm afraid I'd be struck by lightning if I didn't pick him. The horse has the best form and figures. The horse doesn't need to be as far back as he was in the Breeders' Cup. You know, and while Cyberknife may have let that form line down in the Pegasus, every other horse to come out of that race has improved its figure, and 3 of them have won. Horse absolutely loves Churchill, 4 for 4 here, and ran his top going 7 furlongs at Saratoga. This is classic Bill Mott with a target. Be ready for a big win and a bunch more tears. On the front line, it's all about Cody's Wish for me.
Wow. Okay, Philip, come on. Give us something else to swing at here. Away from Cody's Wish. We've got 2 very confident selections. But come on, there must be something.
Well, that means it's probably guaranteed to be no good if everybody jumps on. But, you know, again, this is a horse in general. What I would say is this is a race I normally just pass. Just look at it and say, how do you create value? The great thing about Derby Day and Breeders' Cup and all these big days are that the pools are so much bigger. You know, you might be able to take a horse like this. I think Fortin Hill is like mildly intriguing. He ran really well in the reappearance at Keeneland. This was a horse that was pretty highly regarded earlier in his career. You know, I could just see something like a Cody's Wish and that horse underneath in an Exacta. But I wouldn't be spending any money. I'm with Pete. Just if God's on your side, who can be against you? And Cody's Wishes falls in that category, so I don't want to be against him.
Okay, it's hard to get away from Cody's Wish then, clearly. Let's move on to the Turf Classic, the race before the Derby. I'm getting into the swing of this
That
now.
was good. That was
good. It wasn't even forced.
Yeah,
it was great.
that didn't even sound unnatural.
No, great. This is great. Let's kick on with this. Let's talk about Hong Kong Harry maybe as a starting point. I think for a race like this, obviously he had such brilliant time of it last year. And then I thought, did the reappearance run, was that a screw tightener for this, as we would call it? Is that like a get ready JK for this? Is that how you'd view that race when we last saw him?
I mean, it was a great one in its own right. No, I think they probably wanted to win that race too, and then they were going to show up here. It was just probably all part of the plan. And I like Hong Kong Harry to a certain extent. I will say this, though, like, I just have a little bit of a bias with West Coast turf horses running on this side of the world, this side of the Mississippi.
If you have your in the money bingo card, you can put that one down. Because I was going to say it if he didn't.
Yeah, I'm not, you know. But when I like really dove into these turf numbers, they kind of all look the same. They like a lot of these horses look the same. So a horse like Earl's Rock and Hong Kong Harry, as much as I love tossing California horses, I'm going to use. I think Up to the Mark is probably the horse that I would pick if I was being made to make one selection.
You're literally on a preview panel. You're made to have one
No,
selection.
No,
That's
just,
what we need from you.
No. That's what the other people do. They lie to you and tell you that they want to pick this horse. I'm not going to lie to you.
Honesty is the best policy here, kids.
I'm gonna use a lot of horses in this race when I'm betting real money, not fake. I'm on TV money.
Fair, okay.
No, and that's just, I'm not other that other channel. And I will say this too is a point that I brought up earlier about Santine.
Santine. Go Santine.
This horse has run extremely well at Churchill, but that was on the bad turf course, and I talked to a lot of people that felt like this horse really just liked that bad turf course. So could he win? Sure, maybe he likes this one. But I would be a little bit careful. And then the 9 and the 10, I think both of those horses, Spooky Channel and Bye Bye Melvin, they're very talented, but it feels like they want longer. So for me to sit up here and tell you that, like, I love this one horse in here, it's just, I have no idea. And, like, and I tell people this all the time. They always ask me, people DM me or whatever, I want to be a better horse player. And the answer to that is know what you know and believe in it, and accept what you don't know and believe in that too. I have no clue who's going to win this race.
Look at that. I love that. Honesty is definitely the best policy.
I'm going to use a lot of horses.
That's
5, 6, 7, 9, 10.
Yeah.
I wrote down for you.
I'm going to use a lot of horses.
A lot of horses.
And I'll use Wolfie's
used.
Dynagos too as the horse that got me busted in the NHC because he won at 20-1 and then people started hating and wondering where I was.
Okay, so
that's a story for another time.
I think we've got about six horses' names in there. That's great. Can you narrow that down a bit, Phillip, for us? Like we've got a sort of no view race, but lots of views race from JK. Do you have more of a specific view?
I agree with JK's general premise. Just
okay.
Traditionally, these West Coast horses are not as good. This is a subpar group of East Coast horses. I think Up to the Mark is very, very talented. He was bet down to less than even money on his debut at Saratoga, won, kind of lost his way a little bit, and he's like reinvented himself on the grass. To me, you just don't see horses make the kind of moves he made at Gulfstream, where it's like he just was coming wide and just mowing horses down. I thought last time that was just such a weird race, the way it played out, where they went for home so far out. Modern Games was undefeated in North America at that point. He was a neck off that horse and was further behind him. He made up more ground than Modern Games did. I hope he's kind of near 4-1 or 5-1. Again, I think you could go a lot. I would be with Jake. I think you go a lot of ways, but I'd be pretty interested in him at his morning line price.
And to be clear, to kind of pull together what I was saying, like, this is a spot where you just try to bet it right.
Yeah.
You try to efficiently wager in a way where you can cover a lot of different scenarios. I'm not going to just throw up my hands and just hit the all button and hope that something good happens. I'm gonna press on a horse like Up to the Mark, try to have him 5 to 6 more times than I have some of the other ones. But I'm not going to get beat by a horse like Masterpiece, or I'm not going to get beat by Bye Bye Melvin, who I think it's too short for. Those types of horses won't beat me. And singling Cody's Wish will allow me to put that equity in different places on all of these horses.
Okay, I like it. Peter, over to you. Are you viewing this as sort of wide open as the boys are and playing it with different angles?
A lot could happen here, but I'm giving Santine credit for the form around the turf course, and I might be completely wrong about this, but I'm thinking if he handled this unique surface when it was in its so-so state, that maybe he's going to be able to handle it even better as it's come around. And, this is a horse that has run very well around here. I thought had a very useful prep race with a trip in a synthetic race that came up fast. The horse has shown a lot of versatility in terms of running style. I'd love to see a hold-up run, and I want to see Santine come running here. I got plenty of 8s. I'm also with JK. I usually question the West Coast turf form, but Hong Kong Harry just looks too good to me. Moved early into the fast pace in the kill row. There are questions, but I want. And then Spooky Channel, to me, is a horse that I definitely want on tickets. Hell of a claim. Now a multiple graded stakes winner. And, with a closing effort here, This horse, it might have been a peak effort last time, but just makes too much sense on figures and form. So I'll center on 8, 7, and 9, but I don't mind the idea of having a lot of backups in this spot either.
Okay, centering on 8, 7, and 9. Let's move on. The Kentucky Derby. This is it. This is the big one. This is what you're here for. This is what I'm here for God's sakes. So this better be a good renewal, everyone. Actually, on that note, Peter, how good a renewal is this? Before you give us your selection, just in terms of a Derby, how many really good horses? Obviously, we're going to focus in on Forte, but before we get to the actual horses and their specifics for this race and what you think's going to win, do you think, have I come here for a good renewal? Do you think I'm going to see not only just a good winner, but good horses in behind?
I think it's a fascinating race. I mean, there are a lot of different ways you can go. I wish I could zero in and tell you this is the star who's going to be a Triple Crown contender. It's not that kind of Derby. But at the same time, I think it's a mistake to go too knee-jerk about the figures these horses were running early in the year and make some sort of blanket statement about the crop. I think there's a real chance we could have some serious runners in here. I mean, when you're looking at the figures, they are historically, they're not great, but a lot can happen between now and by the time the curtain falls on a lot of these horses' career. I'm not gonna evaluate them on their work to date. I'm gonna look to the blue sky, and I think there's plenty of it with this group.
Okay. In England or over in Europe, when you're talking about the Epsom Derby, to be clear.
You're allowed that one,
I'm allowed
yes.
that one, yeah. When you're talking about the Epsom Derby, there's a bit of an old-fashioned saying that's kind of like, if you think you've got 3 Derby contenders, you've probably got no Derby contenders in your yard. Because
we would say that with quarterbacks in
that's
American
an American
football.
football thing.
Okay, well, yeah. So
If
we
you have
use
2
that,
quarterbacks, you don't have any. Yeah.
and it doesn't always play out because you've got Aidan O'Brien throwing loads of darts at the board, and often he wins the Derby at Epsom. But I kind of get what he's saying. I get what everyone's saying with that. And obviously, Todd Pletcher in here was his 3, and Forte seems the standout. But then you've got Tappet, Trice, and Kingsbarns, and everyone's making cases for them. JK, is it a case of if you think you've got 3 Derby winners, you don't have 1 Derby winner?
No, I mean, I think, I mean, you guys experience it too, but like when people like Todd, Bob, Chad, Brad Cox, they get a lot of good horses. So they sometimes end up with 3 or 4, and it doesn't
Aidan O'Brien.
Aidan O'Brien,
Yeah.
right? So I don't think it doesn't really matter to me at all. Look, I think that Todd has a very strong hand. I hate where I think if Tappet Trice drew outside, I would feel confident saying if Tappet Trice was the 16 and Forte was the 15, I would feel very confident guaranteeing that Todd is going to win with one of those 2 horses.
Okay, interesting.
But I hate where Tappet Trice drew from his style. He's a grinder. He's a don't get stopped horse, and he's down on the inside, and I think that's a little bit of a problem. So to answer your direct question, I think that Brad Cox or Todd Pletcher win with one of their horses, and the 2 that I like the most, and Tappet Trice and Verifying, drew horribly.
Okay, drew horribly. So okay, but that's the lay of the land. That's where we've got to now. So how are you playing it then, given how the draw's gone?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna use 2 fills, because who needs 2 fills when you got 1?
Oh, nicely done. I see that. How long have you had that teed up for?
I swear to God, I thought about it 12 seconds ago, and I text my fiance, "Watch this Phil joke." I swear, just thought about it.
That's your top pick.
No. I think 2 fills is interesting though.
2 fills.
Okay. I'm going to use Verifying and Tappet Trice in case they work out trips. In case Verifying gets loose, because he is the best speed in my opinion, if he runs away from there, which I think they'll send him away from there, and no one goes, and he goes 23 and change, he can absolutely win. Now, what's probably going to happen, he's going to get pressure, and it's not going to be good, but if he gets loose, he'll win.
Okay.
If Tappet Trice breaks clean and the horses fold over, next thing you know, he's in the clear of the 3 path, and he runs all the way around there in the 3 path, he can absolutely win. Not likely, but those 2 horses can win for sure. Now, I'm going to work more towards the Angel of Empire Forte thing, and I actually think that those 2 are likely my second favorite from both barns, from Brad and Todd's barn, but they have better draws, and I think they're very talented horses, so I think that one of them 2 could win. And then I've been sweating about this all day. I'm also going to use a little Derme Sodagake. That's it?
Yeah, you got it. That's good.
You got it.
God, do you know what? Well done. You nailed that. Congratulations.
Yes. So now, like I said, there's been lots of derbies, and Pete can attest to it. I didn't spend $1 on any other horse except for American Pharoah. I didn't spend $1 on any other horse except for Justify. If there's a horse I love, I will bet every single dollar I have through them. But I also accept what I accept, and This is a trip derby where if you love a horse, they could run second in this race, and you cannot wait until the Preakness to bet them. This is going to be a trip derby where someone who's really, really good is going to get a really bad trip, and I can't predict who it's going to be. So, a basis of my day on this Kentucky Derby is going to go through singling Cody's wish to get alive to a lot of horses in the turf and a lot of horses that I think can win in the Derby. Because outside of that, I'm just kind of hoping, and I try not to hope when I'm betting.
Okay, it's fascinating insight. I love that. I love hearing that, the way in which you're playing the whole card, the way that's going to pan out for you. And we love the honesty as the best policy here.
I mean, my official pick will be, I haven't thought of this yet. I'm going to.
Here we go.
Make it up on the fly.
Everyone.
I'm going to pick to get lucky and get a trip with Tapit Trice.
Okay.
I don't think that it's a smart wager. Because I think a lot of things
over here in
a
the
lot
crowd.
of things have to go right.
Looks.
But I think he's the best horse.
If your feet were held to the fire for, say, a final answer,
I have to pick a horse, I'm going to pick Tapit Trice. But I'm not betting it that way. That's who I'll pick.
It's good insight. It's good insight. Over to you, Peter, then. How are you betting this? Do you think that Forte is the standout? Obviously, it's the horse everyone's latched onto, the horse with all the ones, the sexy profile, everything we've spoken about tonight, the class angle in here. Are we just avoiding the obvious here? Draw everything. Can he overcome all of that and just win anyway?
Here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that Forte, in the end, is not going to be the 5-2 that he is internationally, and he's actually going to be underrated because of his lack of a speed figure advantage, and he's actually going to be a bettable 7-2, 4-1, and you're going to see other money come on some of these other contenders, and you can press him up as an A-type runner. I think just on his paper, on his form, what he's accomplished, his resume, I mean, this is a very good horse who may have just not had his best day the last day and maybe set for more of a peak effort on the day when it really matters. As a 5-2 favorite, I'd be against, but I'm going to just take the view that he's going to be a better price. I'm including him in the mix. But my top pick, the other horse I think stands above this field, is the 17 runner, Derma Sodagake. This is a horse that ran an absolutely huge
That's
figure.
horse number 17, everyone.
Yes.
Horse number 17.
By any standard, he ran the fastest of these horses in the preps. I think he's going to get a good forward journey. I don't mind the outside break for him. I don't think they want to go to the front. Seems like Continuar may almost be in this race, like at this stage, as a rabbit for Derma Sodagake, clearing all and giving him a chance to, sort of get a good spot in the slipstream. I think he's very interesting at 10, 12-1. I'm going to have a lot of action rolling through Forte and Derma Sodagake. And then in terms of backups, I mean, that's where you can get very, very creative in here. There are so many runners who there are scenarios can win. But in terms of my A-line, I'm 17, 15. And then in terms of backups, Angel of Empire certainly should be on tickets, especially if Wet Paint runs well on Friday, making certain suggestions about what those figures at Oaklawn should have been. I also think Two Phils goes here with a big shot, verifying if he has a chance to get a trip. But, in terms of my top selections, it's 17, 15.
Okay. Phil, over to you for the final word on the Kentucky Derby. Where did you land?
I ended up landing on Angel of Empire.
Oh.
I thought, I love Forte. I thought his race first off the bench, it was like just push button. And I think, like, you compare a horse like him to Tapit Trice, what JK is saying is Tapit Trice just is going to grind and grind and grind. And if it was just a straight race and nobody could get in your way, he's going to win every time probably. But there are 20 horses. He's going to have to navigate a trip. I think, like, last year, Rich Strike won. And at one point, Pete and I both liked Mo Donegal, I think. And Mo Donegal was down inside. He ends up going 10 wide. And had he just stayed on the rail, he gets the same trip Rich Strike does, and he probably wins. But he was a very similar horse. He ended up winning the Belmont. He wanted to run long, and he couldn't get stopped. So they just said, you know what, we can't risk being down inside because our race is over. And instead they said we're going to go a route that we're never going to win because we're going to be super wide. I think Angel of Empire has shown just a big acceleration that I think in the Derby you almost have to have, like when the hole's there, you got to hit it. It doesn't matter if it's the right time or not. And maybe you hit the lead too early. Maybe you don't get the 1.25 miles. That's where I ended up landing. I think, like you said, I think if you can get past maybe the Forte, Angel of Empire, like, again, I would have loved Tapit Trice if he drew outside. I think a horse like Disarm is super interesting to me. Just gets back to Rosario. It's the same connections that had Epicenter last year that, felt probably hard done by that, he didn't get there. I think he's a horse that could just be, run second at a huge number. But I ended up going with Angel of Empire. I'm not way against Forte. I think he's, he just loves to win races. I don't think he had a terrible trip last time. A lot of people he had a really rough trip. He just had to come from off of it, and the race price set up for him. But I went with Angel of Empire. I just think that I love the turn of foot. He feels like a horse that's getting better. I'm probably like the world's biggest Flavian Pratt fan, and I think he's very talented. So that's where I landed.
Famous last words segment. We didn't talk about this, but let's do it because it's funny.
God.
A horse that people are talking about that you don't like, so that you can feel stupid when they win.
Yeah.
For me, it's confidence game. Like you take 70 days off and you're like gonna maybe run in this race and you're not gonna run in this race and you're maybe gonna run in that race but you're not gonna run in this race but you're
Not
gonna
good
maybe
enough
wait.
for a race like this. No thanks.
I can't deal with it.
Yeah.
I'll book Kingsbarn's action.
Oh, okay, Kingsbarns. All right. And what about you, Phil?
Is there one that you don't like? And
Yeah.
I would just be against Practical Move. I would be against them that he's going to get 1.25 miles. It's weird actually. Normally California, a lot of these races are like 5-horse fields every Derby prep, and you just have to figure out how good is the Baffert versus the other Baffert versus the other Baffert. But this thing, he ran against a 9-horse field, but he's really gotten like dream setups in both races. He loves to win. I could see him coming down from 10-1. I'd just be a pure pedigree play that I don't think he's going to see out the 1.25 miles.
While we talk
Okay.
about that form, though, I do need to we need to talk about Skinner for like a minute.
Well, you've only got a minute.
I think Skinner is a little bit interesting as a long shot. I just want to name check him as one. The hands he's in, I could see him peaking on the big day. And of those Santa Anita Derby horses, he would be the one I would want at the price.
Okay, special mention too then. I think that about wraps up our Kentucky Derby preview show, everyone. If you want a little nod to the European action, you should back Royal Scotsman in the 2,000 guineas on Saturday. He's too big a price. He's overlooked in the betting. And back Mama's Girl in the 1,000 guineas on Sunday. Those
Love
are my
it.
selections for the classics over in England.
And you can bet those through any American ADW,
Yep.
so they will gladly take your action.
There you have it. You have something for everyone.
Unfortunately,
here, guys.
it's not fixed. You don't get fixed on. You still got to take the Whirlpool.
Disappointing, but anyway. That wraps up the show. Anything else to add, Peter?
Great job, Vanessa. Great job, our friends here at Malone's and TaylorMade Partnerships. This is, for me, JK, this is the most fun stuff that we do all year.
Yeah, good luck to the 3 runners that Medallion has this weekend, and thanks for having us back. It's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We appreciate everything. Appreciate everybody coming, and I'll let Pete
Special
get the
shout
final
out to
word.
Molly, too. Molly does a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
job putting this all
Shout out
together.
Molly.
Woo! That wraps up the show.
Thank you for that.
Should I do my line? Do we have one? Are we still on air?
May
You win all your photos.
Nice,
That's right.
nice.
It's not a show without that.
We're done.
Done and dusted.